Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Rudman from the Musical Theater Project, this time with our 9th edition of Let's Go to the Movies. On our new evening, this was by popular demand, we're now doing the Q&As on Thursday nights. So welcome. And what a leap we're going to take from 2 weeks ago when we did Summer Stock, which is sort of a movie musical that's lighter than air. Tonight, we're not lighter than air. Tonight is the 1971 film of Fiddler on the Roof, which is really, if you get right down to it, a musical drama directed by Norman Jewison and starring Topol. Forgive me for repeating myself, I always say this. If you're a first timer, read these instructions on the screen so you're gonna know how to participate by asking questions or making comments, okay? Bob Knoll has the night off, so it's just you guys and me plus TMTP's Heidi Lang and Joanna May Cullinan. And since we want to dismiss even the diehards by 8 o'clock so they can tune into the convention, let's get started right now. First, an apology that you didn't get the usual intro from me before you watched the movie. What happened was that we sensed that there were going to be some copyright difficulties in doing what I was going to do, so we decided it was better to be safe than sorry. But I hope you had a chance to at least look at the questions that we're going to be exploring this evening. So that's the apology. And here is the drill as I have laid it out for you. I want to give you a fast Broadway story about Fiddler on the Roof that you may never have heard. Then I want to say a little bit about Norman Jewison, who directed the movie in 1971. Then I want to know what you think about the decisions that Norman Jewison made when he made this film back then. Then I'm going to ask you a few personal questions. I really am. And we're going to break at 7:35 so that even the diehards, they can continue with us a little longer till 8 o'clock. But we want to make sure that at 8 o'clock, everybody has the chance to tune in on the convention. So that is the lay of the land. I'm going to assume that everybody who's being part of this tonight has seen the stage version of Fiddler on the Roof. You know, it premiered in 1964, so there have been a lot of chances. Or you may have seen your sons or granddaughters' high school production or whatever. On Broadway, the show ran for 3,242 performances on Broadway alone, and there were 7 different tevias. But let's get the lay of, I want to get the lay of the land, and I want to do a little survey first, because since we're exploring the film tonight, which I know you've seen, I want to find out if this is the first time that you saw the film version of Fiddler on the Roof. Yes or no? Is this the first time for you with the film? Yes or no? And while you're raising your hands to give us the answer, I want to tell you that fast Broadway story, just because I think it's interesting, and it also proves that that artists, even the best artists, are only human, just like the rest of us. So this goes back to 1961, when Jerome Robbins, who directed and choreographed, was having early planning meetings with the writers. And the writers included composer and lyricist Jerry Bach and Sheldon Harnick, as you know. And Sheldon is now 95, by the way, but still working. And so Jerome Robbins held these planning meetings with them before a word had been written. And he would say to them at each of these meetings, "So what is this musical about?" And one of them would say, well, it's about this dairyman in Eastern Europe, in Tsarist Russia, who has 5 unmarried daughters. And Jerome Robbins would say, no. And this went on time after time until one time Robbins asked the question, and apparently it was Sheldon Harnick who said, it's about a changing way of life. And Robbins said, yes, that's what it's about, and you need to write a song about that. And as you know, they did write a song about it. It's the opening number. If this were being done with a live audience, you would all yell out, tradition, because that's what it became. And that's one of the major themes in Fiddler on the Roof. And the other one, of course, is anti-Semitism. And we're going to come back to that a little later on. So where do we want to go next? We want to go to my just telling you in a brushstroke, you know, the composers and the lyricists, they always get top recognition, but the guys and women who write the scripts, they often get neglected. And in this case, the guy who wrote the script for both the Broadway and the movie is one of the great ones. His name is Joseph Stein. And what I think is so cool about Joe Stein writing the script for this particular show is that he began his career as a social worker. Doesn't that seem just right? So it was the perfect team. Now we move on to the next topic, which is Norman Jewison. Just a few words about him, because this is a guy who had never directed a musical before in his life, even though he was a major American director, but he was obsessed with doing Fiddler on the Roof. And the thing about Norman Jewison that's important as we have our exchange tonight is that he was sort of the social conscience of the American film at that time. And beginning in the 1960s, you know, I can say to you, the Russians are coming, which is a very dark satire on the Cold War in the 1960s. It was Jewison who directed In the Heat of the Night with Sidney Poitier and Rod Steiger, which is a film about racism in a small southern town. It was Norman Jewison who directed Rollerball, which is a film in which corporations, God help us, corporations take over the world. And it was Jewison who also directed The Hurricane, starring Denzel Washington, which is a searing film about racism. By the way, Jewison is still with us. He is 93, and he reminds us, this is kind of interesting, that, you know, his name is Jewison, so people assume he was the son of a Jew, but in fact, Norman Jewison was not Jewish at all, which meant that he spent months researching before he began filming Fiddler on the Roof, because he had to make sure that he really understood the culture. Next topic. Now, I want to know what you thought of the choices that Norman Jewison made in making this film. He made thousands and thousands of choices, which is why I think this film is so great. And we shared with you that little interview he did with Sheldon Harnick. And it's interesting when Sheldon talks about how they wrote Sunrise, Sunset. But I think just as interesting is Norman Jewison talking about how crucial it was for him to get Isaac Stern, the greatest violinist in the world, to dub the solo violin passages in this movie musical. I think that's just great. And it's so representative of the way he worked. So I want to start by hearing from a few people who have seen this musical on both stage and screen. Actually, Joanna, we should get the results of the survey, I think, as we launch into this. What would they be?
It looks to me like we only had one official hand raised. There were a couple people that were physically up and down, but I only had one official hand raised for never seeing it before.
Okay, well, we're doing this for that one person, especially, but also for everybody else, because I bet for many of the rest of you, it's been a long time since you saw the movie. So I want to know, those of you who have seen Fiddler on the Roof both on stage and screen, how would you compare the original stage version with the film? And you can start by telling us, how would you compare Zero Mistel with Topol? Why do you think Norman Jewison would cast Topol instead of the great Zero Mistel? Why would Topol get this part?
Daniel Hahn has his hand raised.
Oh, Daniel Hahn always has his hand raised.
I do. It's been raised
Oh.
since I got here. So.
Oh my goodness. Okay, and we also have 22 chats, which is great. Daniel, why do you think Jewison cast Topol?
Well, I should start by saying that Chrissy and I are two people who had never seen this movie before, so you're at least asking questions for the two of us in there. And I think I saw another hand raised too on the screen. I did not see the original Broadway production. I've seen a couple terrific high school productions of this musical that I really enjoyed very much. I couldn't imagine this movie having the same resonance if there were a superstar or a star in that lead role. I thought that the balance of that choice, I loved him. I loved Topol in this movie. I loved the acting so much, especially by the eldest daughter in there. All of the acting I thought was really moving to me. But if there were someone, I don't know, like a young Barbra Streisand or a Zero Mostel in one of those roles, I feel like I might have been distracted by the star power. Who knows? If they were terrific enough in it, it might have won me over and I might have forgotten it. But there's something about that balance for me that really worked. And that's the first thing that comes to mind when I hear that question. But there's probably other good reasons too.
So, yeah, and so let's just hang on to this for a second. Why do you think Topol was the best choice? And I know you guys are going to wonder if Zero Mostel was upset that he wasn't cast. The answer is yes. Zero Mostel was furious that he didn't get this role because, as Topol has said, every good actor in the world wanted to play this part on film. But why else do you think Topol was right for it in terms of what Norman Jewison wanted to do with the film?
I guess the last thing I would say, but I think the realism of it, of the way the film was staged and directed, to me, it's kind of like a magical realism because he does start off breaking the fourth wall and talking to the audience.
The audience, right?
And the fiddler himself, that character is magical to me. But besides those couple of things, I think the realism of it, I could believe him as a milkman in that, in the early 20th century.
Yeah.
That environment. I just bought it. And I don't know that I would have bought it if it had been a Hollywood star. I just don't know if I would have.
Yeah, and Zero Mostel was larger than life, writ large, and that's not the film that Norman Jewison wanted to make. Someone chatted, Wayne Wensky chatted that we should note that Norman Jewison also directed Moonstruck. As far as I know, his only romantic comedy, but even Moonstruck has depth to it, which is true of everything Norman Jewison did. So let's just even futz around with that question a little more. You've pretty much answered it, Daniel, but have you noticed, you guys, that there are no stars in this film? Very unusual for a movie musical. Anybody want to add to what Daniel has said? Herb Drower, you have your hand up, but we got to make sure you have your audio on because we can't hear you yet. And by the way, Herb, while you're getting your audio up, I know I owe you a book in the mail. It's going out this week.
And Bill, after Herb, you've also got Hetty.
Oh, Hetty, good. Okay, great. Herb, do we have your audio? We don't. Okay, while we wait for your audio, let's go to Hetty Milgram.
Oh,
Hi, everybody.
Oh, now we got Herb. We'll come
okay.
back to you, Hetty.
This is Eileen. This is Eileen. I was just going to say there was one star in the movie.
Molly Pecan?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
That's the matchmaker.
Well,
Yeah.
Molly Pecan, right.
I don't want to be argumentative. I would say Molly Pecan was a star in terms of absolutely the Yiddish theater, the Jewish audience, not a movie star though, in the typical sense, but a wonderful character actor. And boy, isn't she great as Yenta?
Mm-hmm.
She really is. Herb, you were on.
I was just going to say the same thing, that Molly Pecan would hit you on the head with a wet noodle if she heard you say she wasn't a star.
But you guys know what I mean when I say star with a capital S. Not quite the same thing. So as Daniel has pointed out, Norman Jewison wanted to direct this film realistically. Why do you think he made that choice? Because there are hardly any movie musicals that are really directed realistically. We just don't expect that of the form. Why do you think? Why do you think realism was an important choice for Fiddler on the Roof in 1971?
Hetty? You want to hear from Hetty?
We got Hetty. Of course I want to hear from Hetty. Go for it, Hetty.
The first one I've been able to come to, Bill.
Yeah, welcome.
I know. Thank you. Michael and I are happy to be here. I wanted to add just one other word to what Daniel said, and then I can answer the question you just asked. And that was relating to Zero Mostel. The word that I always think of when I think of Mostel is clown. And I think the last thing that this movie needed, this musical needed, especially on film, was a clown. It's one thing to be on a stage and to be projecting from far away this kind of, the exaggerated behaviors, but a film by its nature, its very nature, is very intimate. And to feel intimately with each of these characters, and to not have any of them, other than Molly Pecan, who I loved, be a star where you're distracted because you're thinking of the other roles that person is playing, constantly comparing it. I think that this really allowed all of us who are watching it to experience it differently than we did when we saw the stage versions. I think that the poignancy comes out much more in this way when you're not concentrating on the star power of the individuals, and when you have that the intimacy with the characters. But I also think that the reason that Jewison may have wanted to do this more seriously is that the songs themselves, the music, the lyrics, lend themselves to a much deeper introspection. The songs are very introspective, Far From the Home I Love, and all these things. They're beautiful, beautiful songs. And to really give them the seriousness with which I think the subject matter demands, and challenging all of us to think about it not just in the context of the play, but in the context of today of our own lives.
Yeah.
It worked beautifully.
That's great. Thank you for that. And this was something I didn't notice. I read the quote from Norman Jewison. You guys may have noticed that as the film becomes increasingly serious, particularly beginning with the pogrom, the film has the look of a black and white film instead of a color film. So it all was working together, even in terms of the art direction. Yeah, I agree with what you guys have said about the realism. I wonder if there were any particular realistic details in this film that really struck you. Anybody? I feel like I'm shirking my job here because there have been many chat remarks that I haven't mentioned. Ellen says to everyone, Zero Mistel was too broad, exactly the point that's been made several times. And Blanche notes, and this is correct, that Zero Mistel was notoriously difficult to work with. Yeah, that's true too, Blanche. Anyway, any realistic imagery or just little moments in the film that struck you by their realism?
Bill, you have Deborah Matthews.
Deborah Matthews is back with us, and she's come every time since 1776. Hello, Deborah.
Oh, since before then. Hello. So I was really struck by the fact that they went back to old photographs to see what people looked like. And they really captured the kinds of faces and the attire and the background and the richness of that. Then you couple that with all the actual animals running around and making noises and stuff. It's just so moving.
Yeah, and that brings up another question, and you guys are probably way ahead of me, but do you know where this film was shot? I bet Joanna does, so she can't answer. Anybody know where the film was actually shot? Deborah does. What's the answer?
Well, Yugoslavia was part of it. It was a good part of it. It was also shot in London, and I think there were some other locations, but Yugoslavia was most of it.
Yeah, the interiors were shot in London, but all the exteriors were shot in Zagreb when Tito was still in control. And Jewison tells the funny story about how they had wonderful cooperation from the government because, believe it or not, Tito loved musicals. And Yugoslavia was perfect, wasn't it? Because Jewison, in his desire for realism, wanted to get the look of the shtetl. And for any of you who don't know what that word means, we're talking about villages in Eastern Europe that were inhabited by Orthodox Jews before the Holocaust. And it turns out that in Zagreb, there were many locations that really hadn't changed much at all since 1904, which was when this story takes place. So it was such a blessing that they could go there and do it and spend so much time doing it.
Well, I would jump in and say I loved the realism of like the trudging through the mud.
Yeah.
You hear the boots coming out of the mud. I love to have behind me the bottle dance, like when the dust is coming off the ground and they're sliding. And the other thing that really struck me was the sound of that sewing machine. That's something you would never hear in a Broadway production. Everyone is silent and focused, and you hear that. It's just, I loved it. I love the whole thing.
Yeah. You know, there are those people out there who do not like the film compared with the Broadway original. And I should tell you guys, because I made a big deal the last time about Ken Bloom's book of the 101 best musicals of all time, which he includes Damn Yankees and Summer Stock. Interestingly, he does not include Fiddler on the Roof. What do you think about that? So we have to take all these guys with a grain of salt. But some of the people who say they don't like this movie say that it's too serious for a musical. Any responses to that?
You've got Blanche's hand raised for quite
Okay, we haven't heard Blanche speak, and we must get her on camera. Hello, Blanche. Blanche, are you up?
Yep, we're unmuting.
Unmuting.
Is.
There you
Sorry
go.
about that. I couldn't find the unmute button. I had several thoughts. I think Jewison went back to the original Sheldon Harnick stories and maybe brought in the real feeling. And people should read that. Tevye and His Daughters. It's in your library. Do check it out. I really like the realism. I like the dust coming up when he danced with his animals. I like the mud that somebody mentioned. I like the change of seasons, which you cannot do on the stage. I went through half a box of tissues. I am Jewish, but I don't think you have to be.
Right.
And I think in today's, you're going to get to this question, but my hand's gone up a lot. I'll get it out of the way now. I think in today's discussion of immigrants, that
Yeah.
this should be very seriously looked at, that nobody wants to leave their home, as awful as it might be. But maybe they have to go to New York or Israel or wherever it's safer, Texas.
Yeah.
I had forgotten a lot about the film. I think the lack of stars certainly underlined the universality of this story. That, yes, Zero was very difficult. There's a whole book about that.
Yeah, there is.
Of course, my son, the whiz kid, owns it. But most importantly, that the universality of this pushing out as well as pulling in experience of the immigrant.
Yeah.
Despite the constable, none of them wanted to leave there. It
Yeah.
was home. We don't know what anything else is. It was, as I said, I went through a half a box of tissues, and the time was so right for you to present this one. And now I'll shut up.
Good, good. And I just want to underline something Deborah said, in case you missed it, because it's another aspect of Jewison's genius and his preparedness, that a lot of the imagery, particularly of the faces of the people from Anatevka at the end of the film, they really were inspired by actual photos that Jewison found from 1904 or thereabouts. I mean, that's a scrupulous attention to detail. And Jewison, in the audio commentary on the DVD, says at one point, as we're watching that footage, he says, "I love these faces." And yeah, that's a big, big deal in this film. Norman Jewison in Hollywood was known as the relentless renegade. You want to comment on that, anybody? Do you see him as a relentless renegade? If so, in what ways?
You have lots of hands raised from previous questions still.
Well, I don't mind. We can talk to someone who's...
I know Sandy Rosenfield had her hand raised.
Oh,
for quite a
Sandy, okay.
while.
Let's hear from Sandy. Can we, Sandy? No.
Oh, am I there? I think I'm there.
You're there? Okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah. The relentless renegade. How would you apply that term?
I'm so sorry. I was actually just writing in the chat about the prior question, and I did want to add this input that my absolute favorite song from the film that I think of every time I think of Fiddler is the song Wonder of Wonders, sung by Leonard Fry in the field. And the realism of just running through the field with his love without any kind of any other particular choreography or scene other than the grass is what I remember. And that's the simplicity of that beautiful love scene.
Yeah. Yeah, point well taken. And of course, we can't not comment on Sunrise Sunset, which has been sung on, probably sung at millions of weddings since 1954. What struck you about Jewison's approach to Sunrise Sunset that seems to me absolutely consistent with the way he approached the rest of the film? Any hands raised?
You've got Sarah May.
Oh, Sarah May. Yeah. Hi, Sarah. Let's hear what you have to say.
To unmute.
There we go. Hi. No, I guess I had stuff to say a long time ago.
Yeah, but you can comment on Sunrise Sunset while we
I
got
love this movie. I haven't seen it in years. It was really fun to revisit it. I think it's beautiful work. You know, it's the realism is the town of Banatevka, that town in Yugoslavia, that wooden town that's old shtetl that's left. It's like the star of the show.
Yeah,
And there are a lot of stars to me. I mean, because there are so many people who were the last remaining stars of the old Yiddish theater that he found and rounded up
yes,
to be all those character actors. And Leonard Fry was like a big star after Boys in the Band.
right.
You know, he was just like my favorite actor in Boys in the Band. And then he was, you know, he was a completely different character for this.
Yeah,
He was wonderful. And
for sure.
wasn't that Austin Pendleton originally?
It was Austin
Yeah.
Pendleton. Yeah. Hmm.
But I loved.
Did
And
I
Michael
tell you guys?
Glazer, I think, you know, is.
Did I tell you guys that Norman Jewison is 94 and still has a lot to say about a lot of stuff? And this was the first film musical he ever made, as I said.
Yeah.
Joanna is not allowed to answer this question, but speaking of Norman Jewison as a relentless renegade, do you know what other film musical Jewison directed? Any hands?
Oh, you've got a
You're gonna
Bruce
love the
Amsel
answer to
hand. You have
this
a Bruce
question.
Amsel hand.
Oh, Bruce Amsel. Oh, yeah, he'll know. Go ahead, Bruce.
Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yes,
Woo!
yes, right, which he directed the next year, and which is a terrifically socially conscious movie musical and dealing with all sorts of important themes. Okay.
Bill?
Yeah.
Judy wanted to mention that every time music was playing, if you saw people walking, they were walking with the beat. Everybody was on the beat.
Very perceptive, and Norman
Close up.
Jewison, yeah, Norman Jewison made that as a very intentional choice, that the movement always was absolutely synchronized with the rhythms of the song. You see it in Matchmaker when they're doing the wash and hanging clothes on the line and everything. It's just absolutely terrific touch. This is a new little feature of our Q&As here. You ready for this? It's called Let's Get Personal, okay? And you have all been doing these for so long now that you're very comfortable with each other. So this is not going to be difficult. I wonder if you could tell me which character or characters you identify with most personally. And while you're thinking about that, there's a chat from Heidi Lang that is really wonderful. She says that as someone who is 100% Slovak, I have always thought the scenes in this movie really were exactly the way all of my family described the village my family came from. Yeah, ta-da, absolutely. Okay, so what characters do you identify with? Herb Drower has his hand up.
Yeah, Bill, can you hear me? Am I unmuted now?
You are gloriously heard.
Okay. Not that I'd want to be him, but my favorite character is the rabbi. He has such succinct answers to every question made. I just love how he answers the most difficult questions. But I wouldn't want to be him.
Well, not to put you on the spot, Herb, but do you share some characteristics with the rabbi, do you think?
I wish I could be as smart to come up with good answers the way he did. that take care of what has to be done, but does it in a very diplomatic way, a religious way, and a humane way.
Yeah.
He does a wonderful job. The lines given to him are just wonderful.
What? No one identifies with Tevye?
We've got Bridget Emerson.
Bridget Emerson. Ah, hey, Bridget.
Hi.
What's your story?
You want to raise your hand? I completely identify with Tevye, and there are many reasons for that. I've had a lot of personal challenges and disappointments, and I've been very resistant to change in my life. And a lot of change that I don't enjoy has been forced on me. And I felt very connected to him in his desire to control the situation and then his willingness to try and see other sides of it. And I also felt just very connected to the amount of loss that he endured and disappointment.
That's beautifully stated, Bridget. Thank you. And my next question actually is related to what you just said, but maybe it'll open it up in a larger way than Tevye. Tevye's big challenge, of course, in this story is adapting to change, right? And I wonder if any of you would speak to what Bridget just did. I wonder if any of you have found an aspect of change in your life difficult. And it would be great to have one or two examples of a change that you had to adapt to that was really hard. Cynthia Dettelbach, could I call on you just because you're so smart? Oh, and we don't have your audio.
I don't want to talk to that issue. I just want to make two very brief comments. Not only were there no Hollywood stars, there were no Hollywood faces. They were very Jewish faces. They weren't always gorgeous, but they worked. And then something about the costumes. For example, on the Shabbat, on Friday night, the men wear these black caftans. And if you looked at the caftans, Norman Jewison or the producers could have had the most expensive things in the world. They were tacky. I mean, talk about the realism. They were cheap. And so every detail, that's just one of 1,000. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. If we have no other takers on the theme of...
You have many hands raised, Bill.
Oh, good. Okay, somebody else on the theme of adaptation to change.
You've got Eileen and Herb Pritzker, and then Sarah May again.
Okay, well, let's go with Eileen because we haven't heard from her yet.
Well, we had to adapt to change. We have a daughter that became Orthodox or frum, and it was very difficult for us at first because we're definitely not Orthodox. And we had to go for some counseling. In fact, we went to an Orthodox rabbi to talk about it so that he could help us get through that change. So it was difficult for us, but we have adapted. We have adapted.
Yeah. That's a wonderful example. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Johnny, you said there were a bunch of hands. Sarah May had her hand up on that one. Difficult change, Sarah May?
I just think the generational gaps. I mean, I think when I first saw this musical, I was one of the daughters. You know, I was always at odds with my father about my choices of mates, and all of my friends were going through difficult times, choosing to marry outside of their race or outside of their religion, and now I sort of understand Tevye and Golda's, you know, as an old lady now watching this, you know, you're just so amazed that the things you really believed, were traditions get, turned upside down. And the sort of surprise and the delight that you take as your children step out and make other choices and
all the cycles forward. Generation gap is really an important theme in this work too. Thank you for that.
And I think that's why Topol is so lovely. I didn't get a chance to respond earlier, but he had played it on stage in Tel Aviv and in London.
London.
And I just think he was a lovely choice. And both sides of his family had come from Eastern Europe and, been ousted out of their settles in Bavaria. And he just, he seemed to have just the wonderful quality that was so realistic and surprised. And he could have a comedic moment with just a little raise of an eyebrow, but it didn't break the rhythm, the realistic rhythm of the script.
Yeah, absolutely right. I should be breaking this up into the smaller group by now, but I feel like we're on a roll. So we're going to stay all together for a little longer. I want to ask, what do you think that mythical fiddler on the roof represents? And I mean, there are no wrong answers here. It's such an inspired idea that I think was Jerome Robbins' idea. But what does that fiddler mean to you in telling this story? Hands, Joanna?
Hands for a while from Sue and our favorite participant, Sue's husband, who never tells us who he is. And then we also have Hetty.
Okay, well, all right. Well, let's start with Hetty. Go ahead, Hetty. What do you think?
To me, the fiddler on the roof is our collective soul. And it's the one thing that goes with us wherever we are. So at the end of the movie, you have the fiddler trailing along on the road with the people to Anatevka, from Anatevka to wherever the new home is going to be. It is that Yiddishkeit, that part of our soul, whether you're Jewish or not, wherever you are, wherever your home is, there's who the fiddler is. And that fiddler, I'm going to take him with me, and I'll be there. I'll be home.
Yeah, that's good. And Donna Temple chatted and told us that the fiddler for her represents the trials we all face in our lives, which is a wonderful answer as well. Anybody else about that fiddler? I see a hand from Deirdre Ross. Have we got audio, Deirdre? Yes.
Yeah, to me, that was the tradition, because at the very end, and I don't know if you noticed it, at the very end, the fiddler was way behind them, and he looked at Tevye, and Tevye gave just a brief "come with us." He nodded his head, and then he followed too. In my opinion, because he's going to go to America, but he'll take some of his traditions with him.
Yeah. That works for me. Anybody else on that topic?
You have Sue and Sue's husband.
Sue and Sue's husband. Go for
You're
it.
going to hear from Sue this time.
Okay.
But not on this topic. On something you mentioned earlier about directing realistically. I think lots of people watching from 72, was it on, would have lived this.
Yes.
Lots of the audience would not have done to Hollywoodize this movie.
Right.
Because they went through it, and they went through the immigrant experience and the pogroms, and I think maybe that's why it resonated. It was so authentic.
Yeah.
There was still humor. To have humor with that was really something brilliant.
Yeah. Totally agree.
And Sue's husband has a comment also.
Oh.
Okay, we'll go. Yes, let's go.
Well, I think just the idea of change makes that so universal that every single person who watches that has conflict and change in his or her life that they have to adjust to. And I think that's what makes the film so universal and beloved.
Yeah, me too. That's wonderful. I want to quote from an email I got this week, and it comes from Daniel Hahn's father, which now illustrates for me where Daniel got all his insights. because this is really a wonderful comment about the film. And we don't have time to read the whole thing, but I'll just give you a piece of it. He said, I saw this as a high school production, so I knew the bare bones of the story, but the movie completely blew me away. The second part was incredibly sad. I knew some about the pogroms, and of course it brought to mind the horrors of Nazi Germany. When people wax eloquent on the stability of our nation, I refer them to the first few chapters of the first book of Bruce Catton's trilogy on the Civil War, The Gathering Storm. It is sobering to read those pages, and whenever the date 1860 shows up, replace it with 2020 and reread the passage. So that leads naturally into my final question, which is, what does this film have to say to us now in 2020?
I would say to put people first above politics. People have more value.
Yeah. Civil but eloquent. Thank you, Bridget.
Blanche?
Blanche, yes.
Oh, I was way back at the Fiddler. If you look at Marc Chagall's art,
Yes.
there's the fiddler, there's
Fiddler.
the goats, there's the cows, there's the rabbis, there's the people doing their work, there's the brides and grooms, and certainly the original production took a lot from that, as I think the movie did too. Marc Chagall, look him up.
Yeah. That's right. Yes, Blanche, you even wrote in the chat, don't forget Marc Chagall. Yes, literally you'll see a fiddler on one of his roofs. But let's go back to my question. I'm going to be stubborn about this because I know you guys are all thinkers.
You've got
What
Deborah
is the movie-
Matthews.
what else does the movie have to say to us right now? Right now.
Speak up.
All right. Even though I'm fifth generation Cleveland, in many ways, the world we're living in right now, excuse me, I feel like an immigrant. The things that we take as givens or as normal, gone. And we're watching, unless we can stop it, our world change for good. Whether it's because of economies or the ecosystem or the politics. The universality in this film comes from the fact that there are no stars, that you feel the authenticity of the people who are part of it. And this is part of what I miss now. Things don't feel authentic.
Yeah, they don't. Hetty, could I put you on the spot? I bet you have something to say about the relevance of this film now.
Oh, there are so many things about it. First of all, along the lines of what some other people are suggesting, there's always the thing about history, right? Are we going to learn from our history or aren't we going to learn from our history? And I'm not talking about just the Jewish people. I'm talking about writ large of what we keep doing to people and making them leave and starting over. But I'll tell you that the thing I keep thinking about, and this comes from my own parents, is also the power of resilience. Because at the end of the movie, people are picking up and they're making a new life. And there is most definitely a resilient spirit. So certainly we could look to all of the places in the world where people are being banished and killed and saying, you can't live here anymore. We don't want you. But I want to focus on the resilient piece of it.
Oh, 3 cheers for that. Yeah. Anyone else? Boy, yeah, Cynthia, Sure.
Well, you mentioned the word earlier, anti-Semitism. It still exists.
Yeah.
It's in different forms, and there's anti-racism. There's a lot of antis still going on.
Yeah.
And another message is it's time to change. I think that's another message in the film.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Thank you, everybody. Very rich discussion. I want to move on to what I always call the miscellany. There are 4 miscellaneous items here before we adjourn. One is the next movie. And I chose it for Labor Day. And the movie is Rodgers and Hammerstein's only musical written for film, State Fair. And I have to jump in and say to you, if you only know State Fair from the 1962 remake that has Pat Boone and Bobby Darin and Anne Margaret, I see smiles out there. If that's the State Fair you know, accept no substitutes for the 1945 original, which we'll be showing. You'll get the link at the end of the week. It's really a wonderful film, and it's a real feel-good film, but in the best Rodgers and Hammerstein tradition because it has depth. So join us for that. As usual, do not forget about our survey tonight, and there's going to be a little slide coming up that will remind you about that. We really learn from what you tell us, which is why we moved this from Friday to Thursdays, because we knew that that's what you wanted. And we're including a link to the survey in the chat area. We must always remind you that if you enjoyed being together tonight, we hope you'll consider making a donation of maybe $20 in honor of our 20th anniversary year. But as we always say, if not $20, any amount that is meaningful to you. So thanks for that. And now we come back to me because the 4th item of miscellany is, as you know, we always offer some words by the lyricist who wrote the movie that you've just seen. So that means you're going to hear something from Sheldon Harnick. And Sheldon is 95. And I would say he is the last of the great lyric writers. I mean, Stephen Sondheim is a composer and lyricist, but Harnick specialized in lyrics. And I just think they're matchless. And I thought that since Fiddler is a pretty serious film, as you have all demonstrated, I would choose a lyric by Sheldon that is much lighter and that is really delightful. And many of you know it, the song became a hit in 1963. It's from She Loves Me, which was their Broadway musical just before Fiddler on the Roof. I won't quote all of it, but I will quote a chunk of it. George sings this song about Amalia. That's all you have to know. It's all going to be clear. Sheldon says that when they wrote Fiddler, when they wrote She Loves Me, it was the first time he had the courage to write songs that really expressed things about him personally that he used to keep locked up. So keep that in mind as you hear this. She loves me. And to my amazement, I love it knowing that she loves me. She loves me, true. She doesn't show it. How could she when she doesn't know it? Yesterday, she loathed me. Bah! Now today, she likes me. Ha! And tomorrow? Tomorrow. Ah, my teeth ache from the urge to touch her. I'm speechless, for I mustn't tell her. It's wrong now, but it won't be long now before my love discovers that she and I are lovers. Imagine how surprised she's bound to be. She loves me. She loves me. I love her. Isn't that a wonder? I wonder why I didn't want her. I want her. That's the thing that matters, and matters are improving daily. Yesterday I loathed her, bah, now today I love her, ha, and tomorrow, I'm tingling, such delicious tingles. I'm trembling. What the heck does that mean? I'm freezing. That's because it's cold out, but still I'm incandescent, and like some adolescent, I'd like to scrawl on every wall I see. She loves me. She loves me. And I just have to tell you as a PS that the line that he's so proud of, because it revealed him, is when he writes, my teeth ache from the urge to touch her, which Sheldon told me used to happen to him when he was young and felt the first blush of love. His teeth used to ache way in the back of his mouth. So there you have it. It feels to me, even though we have technically 5 minutes before we tune in, I think we've kind of done what we came here to do tonight. So I'm going to suggest that we adjourn. I'm going to thank you for wonderful participation tonight. Boy, this really went in all kinds of great places. And I want you to watch the original State Fair. And we'll see you 2 weeks from tonight. And in the meantime, have a terrific weekend. Thanks and good night.
Thank you.